Okay, I'm sorry I had to make a second video for this last part because my dog started barking. So I left off by saying that when it comes to productivity, not to assume that if people are getting paid more, workers, let's say that their wages increase, do not assume that they're going to be happier about that and that they will produce more efficiently. When it comes to the increase of wages, that is a cost of production. And so in a lot of the, in the two assignments that I gave you, I put as a hint to remember that wages are a cost of labor, therefore a cost of production. And I'll explain that when we go through the last part of this handout. So when it comes to productivity, happy, healthier workers will be more productive. They'll supply more and it'll shift to the right. If you have less, if you have unhappy, unhealthy, unmotivated, untrained workers, then supply will go down and it'll shift to the left. The next non-price determinant is technology. And so when it comes to technology, this is like if there's a new process, if there's better technology, if there's a new machine that all of a sudden increases the amount of production that we can produce in one day or with the same amount of resources, then supply will go up and it'll shift to the right. So think an example of this would be like Henry Ford's model, like his production with the Model T and his implementation of the assembly line that increased production by who knows how many times in the matter of one day of the implementation of this process. Think about like new like automated tools or machinery that helped to produce like just the mass manufacturing of goods. So if you think about the newer Willy Wonka video or movie, where the little boy's dad gets fired from the toothpaste factory because he's no longer needed to screw the tops on the toothpaste tubes because now they have a machine to do it more efficiently. That's an example of tools or machinery that help to produce more with the same amount of resources. So if you have better technology, better machines, or a new process, then supply will go up and shift to the right. If you have outdated, unmaintained machinery, then supply will go down and it'll shift to the left. When we get into and when we went over also the production possibilities curve, when we talked about capital as one of the factors of production, and when we went also through the widgets and whatsits, what would have made you guys produce more is if you would have had better staplers or like technology that would have helped you to produce more. And so remember that capital stock is the amount of tools, the machinery, the equipment that economy has to work with. If this capital stock starts to decline, then we won't be able to produce as much. Supply will go down and it'll shift to the left. Later, when we look into the loanable funds market, capital stock is something that will increase our economic growth. Remember when we did the production possibilities curve, that one thing that would make this curve bow out into economic growth, right? One of those things was technology. And so technology will most definitely, because of the increase of our capital stock, most definitely help us to grow economically. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the coming units. The next thing is government regulations. Government regulations are laws that the government implements in either protecting the worker or protecting the consumer. And sometimes governments will implement laws, for example, like if OSHA walks into your factory and says every worker in here needs to be provided a hard hat and steel toe boots, and you have to install fire extinguisher every 50 feet. Those are laws that are implemented to protect the worker. And in doing so, in implementing those regulations, it's considered a cost of production to the entrepreneurship. The business owner is then going to have to go out and purchase hard hats, steel toe boots, and pay for the installation of all of these fire extinguishers and the maintenance of all these fire extinguishers. So when businesses have to comply with government regulations, then it is considered a cost to their inputs or a cost of their production. And so if we have more government regulations, it's more of a cost to them. They're not going to be able to supply as much, so supply will go down and it'll shift to the left. In Donald Trump's administration, most Republicans also as well like to deregulate. It's called deregulation of business, like to not regulate businesses as much. And so then they can produce more freely, they can produce more productively, and so supply will go up, it'll boost our economy, and it'll shift to the right. For example, when it comes to like on the other political end, more government regulations could be like implemented by a Democratic candidate that is environmentally conscious, and he or she may implement government regulations that will force businesses to produce in a more efficient way or within the means to protect our environment, and so that might be more costly to producers, and they'll supply less and it'll shift to the left. So right now, currently, or not currently, but before this whole coronavirus outbreak, Donald Trump's response to the economy was to deregulate businesses and also to cut taxes to allow them to produce more freely. The last one is the cost of inputs. Cost of inputs has to deal with the resources that you use in production. And these are our land, our labor, our capital. Land are natural resources that we buy to produce our consumer goods. Labor are the people that are their skills, their abilities, just their efforts. And wages is what we pay our laborers. So wages is considered a cost of inputs. And I'm going to go back to that when it comes to the productivity of workers. And capital are the tools, the machinery, the equipment, the factories that we use in the production. So let's say, for example, that I am a bakery-like owner. I own a bakery and I'm in the production of cakes. And so if the land resources that I need in the production of cakes would be like flour, sugar, eggs, if those goods if the price of those goods were to go down, I'd be able to buy more eggs, more sugar, more flour, then I'm going to be able to produce more cakes. So the supply would go up and it will shift to the right. Let's say, for example, that all of a sudden the price of eggs skyrockets, and oil and flour and sugar. And so it costs me more to buy those goods, then I'm not going to be able to buy as much. And so then I won't be able to produce as many cakes. My supply will go down and it'll shift to the left. Most of the time, businesses are on a budget, monthly, annually, however they budget for their production. And so when it comes to wages, let's say, for example, that if our minimum wage goes up, I have to pay my workers more. Maybe I could afford to pay 5 workers. I had a budget to pay for 5 workers every month. But if my wages go up and the national government is telling me that I need to increase the minimum wage, then I need to pay my workers more per hour. Well, maybe my budget won't pay for 5 laborers anymore. Maybe it'll only pay for 4 laborers. So now then, because of the cost of my production, because I need to pay them more, then I'm not going to be able to hire as many laborers. I'm not going to be able to produce as much. And so remember when I said earlier not to assume that if wages increase, that people are going to be more productive and that they are going to produce more because they're happier that they're getting paid more. That's not the case. When it comes to wages, it affects the entrepreneurship as a cost of their input. And if I'm having to pay my workers more, then I can't pay as many laborers, so then I can't produce as much and production will actually go down. So again, just remember that wages are a cost of labor, therefore then a cost of production. And when those costs go up, then we can't supply as much. Now, if those costs go down, let's say that wages, that there's wage cuts that are negotiated by a union, for example, and the union negotiates wage cuts so that every worker is not having to be paid as much, well then I can hire more workers and I can produce more. So when those costs go down, for example, then my production will go up, supply will go up, and it'll shift to the right. Okay, I'm hoping that this will all have helped with the understanding of the factors that affect supply. Just remember #StepThroughGiantCactus because we live in Texas, and you should remember the non-price determinants that affect supply. Also, on Tuesday that we have our meeting via Zoom or Google Meets, I'm going to go over this assignment on supply and also this assignment for the change in quantity supplied or supply. And I also put 2 examples for these first 2 to show you what type of explanations I'm looking for. But you should also look into turning that into Google Classroom again before Thursday because Friday is a holiday, a school holiday. And so I just wish you guys the best. I hope to see you on Tuesday via our meeting and our virtual meeting, and have a great week.